Hello, this is Daniel and I'm going electric for the average person. Thanks for coming along for the ride. Coming to you today from Death Valley in California. The Tesla.com trip planner says I cannot make this 235-mile trip on a single charge, but my personal mathematics say I can. Come along on the journey and let's find out who's right. The trip I'm on is going to start just north of the national park. I'm going to supercharge up to 100% at Lone Pine here in California. And then I'm going to drive 50 miles down to Panamint, where I'm spending the night at a resort. And then I'm going to do a 73-mile stint out to Death Valley, the town. And then finally, about 112 miles from Death Valley, all the way down to Baker, California, where I'm going to supercharge again and then continue my drive on to Palm Springs. The route should be about 235 miles. That's assuming I take no detours and don't get off the road and don't turn left or right anywhere, that I just drive straight through on that route, which I'm pretty much planning on doing. And when I do my own calculations for driving my car normally, the efficiency that I get for my regular day-to-day driving, including 75% highway driving and then maybe 25% country roads and cities, is 290 watt-hours per mile. And if you multiply that number by the miles per kilowatt number that you get out of that, by 70 kilowatt hours is what I calculate my battery to have a usable capacity of. That works out to about 241 miles total range if I charge the car up to 100% and deplete it down all the way to zero. Now, that is just barely over 235 miles. So if I actually do that route at my regular highway speeds, I'm going to be coming into Baker at that supercharger with about a 2% charge left in the battery. I am not the kind of person who feels comfortable rolling into a supercharger, or any charger for that matter, with 2%. It's not going to happen. You could have a road detour, a road closure, you could have bad wind, who knows? I'm just not going to do it. So what I am going to do is actually hypermile my way through the park. And what does that mean? It means that I'm going to squeeze every mile out of this battery possible. And how do you do that if you're in a pinch? You do it by slowing down. You take your foot off that accelerator and miraculously miles start building up in your car. It's crazy. The slower you drive, shock of shocks, the more miles you get out of your car. So I'm going to be driving for at least half the trip about 10 to 15 miles per hour below the posted speed limit. Now, a lot of people would rather not come to the park if they had to drive slow. That's okay. Life's about choices. But I am going to come to this park and I am going to make it work. Allegedly, there are a couple J1772 chargers in the park, and I was looking at some third-party apps. There are some NEMA 1430s and 1450s, which are those 240 like RV chargers. I don't have that adapter, unfortunately, so I can't benefit from those RV chargers, but I will see when I'm driving through the park if I can find a J1772, and then I'm also going to figure out whether or not I need it. So this is a lucky little find. Now, it's really windy out here in the desert, so I'm going to get down behind my door and hopefully that'll block the wind so you guys don't have to hear all that wind noise. I pulled into Panamint Springs Resort last night, and let me tell you, when I say resort, what I mean is RV park with tents and cute, tiny little cabins. And the people staying in the cabins around me had a bonfire, and we were chatting about my Tesla. They had all sorts of questions. There was a family from Atlanta, a family from Orange County by LA, and then also two couples from Latvia in Europe, and they were asking all sorts of questions about the car. And then they were like, oh, by the way, I don't know if you saw it, but there looks like there's a Tesla charger right across the street in one of the RV slots. I go to plug in and the rate on this charger is 2 kilowatts. Sometimes it ranges up to 3 kilowatts. So just so you know, if you come to Panamint Resort and you are low on energy, make sure you give yourself plenty of time to plug in, because at that rate, it's going to take you like 30 hours to get from 0 to 100. For all of you who care about the environment, just be aware this whole area is powered by a diesel charger. So that is environmentally like the absolute worst way to charge a car. But on occasion, you're desperate for miles and you're going to do what you have to do. So did I make it through the park on a single charge yesterday? Well, it's the next day and I'm in Palm Springs, so that's a clue that something good happened yesterday. Now, I'm going to give you a couple tips here that you can consider when you think about taking your Model Y into Death Valley National Park. A couple of details about the trip. I did the run at the end of November, so that's pretty much ideal weather conditions. The temperature was 85 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 29 degrees Celsius. And that's a whole lot different than when a lot of other people would go into the park during summertime when temperatures can reach up to 120 degrees Fahrenheit, or even more, which is around 50 degrees Celsius. Because of that, I didn't have to use my air conditioner. In fact, I had the windows down for a lot of it. It was super lovely. If you do go into the park during those high temperature seasons, you might consider getting a sunshade for that beautiful glass roof in your Model Y. That'll help protect your head from some of the excess heat that comes through during summertime, and will also help your battery just last a little bit longer, as the air conditioner would not need to work as hard. The original route was scheduled to be 235 miles. I decided to add the Artist's Drive loop, which was 9 miles or 14 kilometers on top of that. So that would have me up at 244 miles, or about 393 kilometers for the entire drive. That is totally pushing the range of my car with my regular driving. However, there's some great opportunities for regen on the trip as well, especially if you come in from the north side. I arrived pretty late driving from Lone Pine into Panamint Springs. I couldn't really see what was around me, but I could see I was driving up a mountain. There was like one ledge on one side of me, and then there was a cliff on the other side, and there was a person driving an RV in front of me, and they were not thrilled with any of it. They were like way over far from the cliff anytime they had to take a turn. But the good news is there was lots of regen. And then there was a second mountain range that you have to drive over from Panamint Springs as you get into Death Valley. When you drive up that mountain, and I'll show you a screenshot here, I was getting 1,106 watt hours per mile. And for those of you who don't know much about electricity or electric cars, that is a horrible, horrible rate. I usually get around 290 in my typical driving, and can go a little higher, a little lower based on my speed or what I'm doing. 1,106 is absolutely atrocious. You just see the range in your battery going way down. The good news is I was in Santa Fe, New Mexico a couple months back, and I made a video about mountain regen. Check it out. I actually know now that if you go up a mountain, the beauty is you get to go down the backside and you get a lot of that energy back. So if you look at this screenshot, on the backside of that mountain, I was getting minus 450 watt hours per mile. That just means free miles, free energy back into the battery. It was truly phenomenal. So I was able to make my way from Lone Pine into Death Valley with no problem at all. In fact, my average range was something like, if you convert all the numbers into miles per gallon, that's about 185 miles per gallon I was getting. And that had me up in like 400 miles for range for the battery. It was phenomenal. Now, as I was going through the rest of Death Valley, you don't have that sort of benefit of the going up the mountain and getting the regen. So I think if you're coming in from the south side of the park, you might have to do some more calculations, but that north side was really spectacular. There are a couple things to consider before going into the park. Cell phone reception. There is almost none in the entire park. So plan accordingly. Say goodbye to all your friends and loved ones. Get all your business affairs in order, because you will very likely not be on your phone. Now, maybe at some of the destination hotels in Death Valley, there might be something, but where I was out in Panamint, we had a Wi-Fi signal. There were a whole bunch of people like trying to cram around the Wi-Fi router by the gas station. It wasn't working. No one knew where I was. I couldn't contact anyone. And frankly, I loved it. Your Model Y is likely not going to have any access to the internet either, and my Model Y certainly did not. That means that route planning and the navigation app on that display is not going to be able to tell you on the fly what your range is going to be, where you're going to go, all the rest of it. You have to type in the information manually, and I was having trouble even doing that. So before you go into the park, make sure you run all of your routes. You can go to Tesla.com. They have a nice little trip calculator there, and make sure that you have everything plugged in before you go. You may want to print off some maps. You're going to get some maps when you enter the park. Do not count on your cell phone, and do not count on being able to call anyone in case of an emergency. Public chargers are scarce. I did see online that there are 4 public chargers, J1772, behind the ranch at Death Valley. It's a lovely little area with a park and lots of palm trees. But when I showed up, there were 3 taken, and I took the last one, and you had to sign into this app, SEMA Connect, and then they debit you $10, and then you start charging. What I didn't know is as soon as I plugged in, a car drove up, and they were waiting for my spot or any spot to open up. And they were like, oh yeah, we heard that on ChargePoint, you can just plug in for free and tap your ChargePoint. And then some other car drove up and they're like, you don't even need that. You just plug in and get it for free. So I ended up spending about $2 per kilowatt hour for energy if I average it out. The most expensive charge I've had all across America. But hey, I'll consider it a gift to SEMA Connect for at least putting those public chargers there. If you're coming during high season, expect there to be a giant line if you don't have one of those destination chargers, or expect that you're not even going to be able to get into this public charger. So plan ahead accordingly. Now it's time for the moment of truth. Was I able to drive my Tesla Model Y long range with 20-inch wheels through Death Valley National Park on a single charge? It's getting pretty overcast here in Palm Springs, so I'm going to take off these sunglasses and answer yes, but. And what are those buts? The buts are, I started in Lone Pine at 100% charge and arrived in Panamint at 86% because they had that 2 kilowatt charger in the resort. I charged up to 98%, so that's a plus 12%. When I got into Death Valley at that public charger, J1772, I was down at 80% and added an extra 8% in the battery, so a total net of 20% added to my car during the drive. When I arrived south at the Baker Supercharger, I arrived with a 30% charge in the battery. However, if you subtract that 20% that I added to the battery during my charge in the park, I arrived, or would have arrived, with a 10% charge at Baker. So I was able to get through the park 245 miles by using 90% of my battery. But if you're gonna go during hotter weather, windier weather, if you're packing up your car with all sorts of things, you might not be getting the range that I got. And if you're not willing to hypermile and drive super slow through a big chunk of it, I would really encourage you to listen to the Tesla navigation. If they say charge up in Baker, drive all the way up to Beatty and then down and then over to Lone Pine or some other combination, or make sure you get a destination charger and are able to charge up to 100% overnight in the park. That way you can get through the park without any concerns. If you want to hypermile and do it the way I did, you definitely can, but it's going to come at a price. And finally, Death Valley is a real deal desert, especially during summertime. When you drive into the park, make sure you come with enough food and water to get through in case anything happens along your way. Thanks for coming along on the journey with me. I'd love to hear your comments or questions in the comments below. I answer everybody. And I'm going to add my 60-second movie trailer that I made for this video right at the end here. Thanks a lot and have a great day.